Darya Saltikova, also known as Saltichika, was an infamous Russian noblewoman of the 18th century whose name became synonymous with cruelty and abuse. Born into wealth and privilege, she inherited a large estate near Moscow after her husband's death. As a member of the Russian aristocracy, she was expected to uphold her household's prestige, yet she instead became one of history's most notorious female killers, remembered for her brutal treatment of serfs under her control. Her crimes primarily targeted young female serfs, particularly teenage girls and young women assigned as domestic servants. Accounts describe beatings with whips, burning with hot irons, and other sadistic punishments that often led to death. Over the course of years, she is believed to have been responsible for the deaths of more than 100 serfs, though only a fraction of those cases were officially documented. Her violence was often unpredictable, turning acts of discipline into acts of torture, creating an environment of fear and despair on her estate. Saltikova's crimes eventually reached the attention of authorities after numerous complaints were submitted by desperate families of victims. Catherine the Great ordered an investigation, and Saltikova was found guilty of dozens of murders. Though spared execution due to her noble status, she was imprisoned for life in a convent dungeon, where she remained until her death in 1801. Her legacy endures as a chilling example of unchecked power and cruelty. Saltikova's reign of terror highlights how privilege and corruption shielded even the most brutal killers in history. Delphine Lalaurie, often remembered simply as Madame Lalaurie, was a wealthy New Orleans socialite of the early 19th century, whose name became forever linked to one of the most horrifying scandals in American history. Born Marie Delphine McCarty in 1787 into a prominent Creole family, she lived a privileged life and was well respected among the elite of Louisiana society. Married 3 times, she eventually settled in a lavish mansion on Royal Street, where she hosted grand gatherings that cemented her reputation as a refined hostess. Beneath this public image, however, Lalaurie's household concealed shocking cruelty. She owned numerous enslaved people and was notorious for her violent treatment of them. Rumors circulated of severe punishments, but in 1834, the truth emerged after a fire broke out in her mansion. Rescuers entered the upper floors and discovered enslaved men and women chained, mutilated, and subjected to grotesque torture. Reports described individuals starved, beaten, and left in inhumane conditions, revealing years of unimaginable abuse hidden behind the facade of wealth and elegance. The revelations caused outrage in New Orleans. Before she could face trial, Lalaurie fled the city, likely escaping to France, where she reportedly lived in relative obscurity until her death. Although never officially punished, her name became synonymous with sadism and cruelty. Lalaurie's mansion remains one of New Orleans' most infamous landmarks, tied to ghost stories and cultural retellings. Her crimes endure as a haunting reminder of the brutality endured by the enslaved and the horrors that could exist behind closed doors. Mary Ann Cotton was a notorious English serial killer of the 19th century, remembered for her calculated use of arsenic to murder those closest to her. Born in 1832 in County Durham, England, she grew up in a working-class environment, which shaped her early exposure to domestic labor and social expectations for women. Despite her modest upbringing, Cotton became infamous for exploiting trust and familial bonds to commit her crimes, targeting husbands, children, and stepchildren alike. Her method of murder relied heavily on arsenic, a substance widely available at the time and often used in household products. Victims were typically poisoned over extended periods, leading to deaths initially attributed to gastric fever or natural causes. Investigations later revealed that Cotton had likely killed 3 of her 4 husbands and 11 of her 13 children, along with numerous stepchildren. Her motive centered on financial gain, as she collected life insurance payouts from her victims. Cotton's crimes were uncovered in 1872 after the suspicious death of her stepson, Charles Edward Cotton. Forensic advances, including the Marsh test for arsenic detection, enabled authorities to link her to multiple poisonings. She was arrested, tried, and found guilty of murdering her stepson. Cotton was executed by hanging in 1873, maintaining a composed demeanor and never confessing to her other alleged murders. Mary Ann Cotton's case left a lasting mark on criminal history. It highlighted the dangers of domestic poisoning, contributed to the development of forensic science, and remains a chilling example of how trust and intimacy can be weaponized by a female serial killer. Amelia Dyer was one of Victorian England's most infamous female serial killers, notorious for her crimes during the late 19th century. Born in 1837 in Bristol, she trained as a nurse and initially worked in childcare, a position that provided her with both knowledge of infants and societal trust. Dyer eventually became involved in the baby farming trade, a practice in which women took in unwanted infants for a fee, often exploiting vulnerable mothers who could not care for their children. Dyer's crimes involved the systematic murder of infants entrusted to her care. She frequently collected payment from desperate mothers and then killed the children, typically through starvation, suffocation, or other forms of neglect. Over decades, she is believed to have killed hundreds of infants, though exact numbers remain uncertain due to the lack of comprehensive records. Her ability to operate undetected for so long was aided by her outward appearance as a respectable caretaker and her mobility between cities. Authorities eventually discovered her crimes in 1896 after the body of a child was found in the River Thames, prompting an investigation that connected her to multiple disappearances and suspicious deaths. Amelia Dyer was arrested, tried, and convicted for murder. She was hanged later that year, marking the end of one of England's most chilling serial murder cases. Dyer's legacy endures as a haunting example of cruelty cloaked in societal trust. Her case contributed to reforms in child welfare and left an indelible mark on public consciousness regarding the dangers of baby farming. Jane Toppan, born Catherine Cornelia Toppan in 1857 in Massachusetts, United States, became one of America's most chilling female serial killers, earning notoriety for her sadistic experimentation on patients under her care. Orphaned at a young age and raised in foster homes, Toppan trained as a nurse, a profession that gave her access to vulnerable individuals and a position of societal trust. Her genteel demeanor and professional status masked the deadly impulses that would define her criminal career. Toppan's crimes primarily involved the deliberate poisoning of her patients, often using a combination of morphine and atropine. She would carefully study the effects of the drugs on her victims, sometimes prolonging their suffering to observe their final moments. It is believed she killed at least 31 people, including men, women, and children, motivated by a mixture of sadism, curiosity, and the thrill of control rather than financial gain. Her meticulous methods allowed her to operate undetected for years, with many deaths initially attributed to natural causes or illness. Her downfall came in 1901 when authorities grew suspicious after a patient's death, prompting an investigation that linked her to multiple fatalities. Toppan confessed to her crimes in detail, providing chilling accounts of her methods, and was subsequently declared insane. She was committed to a mental institution, where she remained until her death in 1938. Jane Toppan's legacy persists as a haunting reminder of the potential for evil in positions of trust. Her case continues to fascinate criminologists and the public alike, illustrating the dark side of human nature disguised beneath a caring exterior. Belle Gunness, born in 1859 in Norway, became one of America's most notorious female serial killers, infamous for her methodical murders motivated by greed. Immigrating to the United States as a young woman, Gunness settled in LaPorte, Indiana, where she ran a farm and boarding house. Outwardly, she appeared to be a hard-working, widowed matron, attracting suitors and tenants alike, many of whom would meet a grim fate under her roof. Gunness's crimes involved luring men, often through personal ads, and subsequently killing them to steal their money or valuables. She also murdered members of her own family, including children, in acts of calculated cruelty. Her preferred methods included blunt force trauma and sometimes arson, ensuring destruction of evidence. Over the years, she is believed to have killed between 14 and 40 individuals, though some estimates suggest the true number could be much higher due to the difficulty of tracing her victims. Gunness often fabricated stories to cover the disappearances, using her domestic role as a guise to avoid suspicion. The discovery of her crimes occurred after the suspicious deaths of her children and the disappearance of a suitor. Investigators uncovered her victims buried on her property in crude graves, revealing the scale of her atrocities. Belle Gunness herself mysteriously vanished in 1908, with speculation that she either faked her death or was killed. Her ultimate fate remains unknown. Gunness's legacy endures in true crime lore, highlighting the lethal combination of deception, greed, and cunning. Her story remains one of the most chilling examples of female serial killers in history. Dagmar Overbye was a Danish serial killer active in the early 20th century, notorious for her systematic murder of infants entrusted to her care. Born in 1883 in Denmark, she grew up in a modest environment before marrying and later working as a caretaker and midwife. Overbye's position allowed her to exploit the trust of families, particularly mothers who were unable to care for their children, making her crimes especially heinous and shocking to the public. Overbye's method involved taking in illegitimate or unwanted infants under the pretense of providing care, only to kill them shortly thereafter. She would often drown or smother the children, sometimes within hours of their arrival, and collect payments from desperate parents for her services. Estimates suggest she murdered at least 25 children, though some accounts place the number closer to 30, making her Denmark's most prolific female serial killer. Her ability to operate undetected was aided by lax oversight in childcare and societal assumptions about women's caregiving roles, allowing her murderous actions to continue for years. Authorities eventually uncovered Overbye's crimes in 1920, following the suspicious deaths of multiple infants and inconsistencies in her records. She was arrested, tried, and convicted for multiple counts of murder, receiving a death sentence that was later commuted to life imprisonment. Dagmar Overbye died in prison in 1929. Nannie Doss, also known as the Giggling Granny, was an American serial killer active from the 1920s through the 1950s, infamous for her charm and seemingly cheerful demeanor that masked a deadly pattern of murders. Born in 1905 in Blue Mountain, Alabama, she grew up in a troubled household marked by strict discipline and emotional neglect. Her early life shaped her ability to manipulate and deceive, skills she would later use to lethal effect in her adult relationships. Doss's crimes primarily targeted men, including multiple husbands, boyfriends, and lovers, along with other family members, including her mother and grandson. She employed poisoning, most commonly arsenic, as her weapon of choice, allowing her to kill methodically while avoiding immediate suspicion. Over decades, she is believed to have murdered between 11 and 15 people, often marrying quickly to gain financial benefits before orchestrating their deaths. Her cheerful personality and domestic skills helped her maintain a facade of normalcy, delaying discovery and enabling her repeated offenses. Authorities uncovered Doss's crimes in 1954 following the suspicious death of her fifth husband. Investigations revealed patterns of arsenic poisoning and linked her to multiple prior deaths. Nannie Doss confessed to her crimes, providing chilling details about her methods and motivations, which included financial gain, desire for attention, and personal frustration. She was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, where she remained until her death in 1965. Nannie Doss's legacy endures in true crime history as a striking example of a female serial killer whose outward charm concealed deadly intent. Her case continues to fascinate and horrify criminologists and the public alike.